It was a sunny Tuesday afternoon when I opened my mailbox and found the invitation. At first, I thought it was a mistake. The elegant cardstock, the gold lettering, the names, his name and hers. My ex-fiance, Mark, and my best friend, Sarah. Getting married. My hands trembled as I stared at the date. 2 weeks from now. How could this be happening? Sarah had been my rock when Mark and I broke up. She was the one who held me while I cried, who told me I deserved better. And now she was marrying him? I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I sat down, my mind racing. Mark and I had been together for 5 years. We were engaged, planning our future, until one day he said he needed space. I thought it was just cold feet, but he never came back. Sarah was there for me every step of the way. She helped me pack up his things, listened to me vent, and even encouraged me to start dating again. But now, as I looked at the invitation, pieces started falling into place. The late-night calls she said were from work, the sudden trips she took without explanation, the way she avoided talking about Mark after the breakup. It all made sense now. They had been together behind my back, maybe even before Mark and I ended things. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to scream, to call Sarah and demand answers. But another part of me wanted to pretend I never saw the invitation, to cut them both out of my life and never look back. Then, as I sat there, a thought crept into my mind. What if I went to the wedding? Not to cause a scene, but to face them. To show them that I wasn't broken, that I was stronger than they thought. The idea scared me, but it also felt right. I needed closure, and this was the only way I was going to get it. The day of the wedding arrived, and I dressed carefully. I chose a sleek black dress, something that made me feel powerful. As I drove to the venue, my heart pounded in my chest. The wedding was at a fancy hotel, the kind of place Mark always dreamed of getting married. I walked in, my head held high, and immediately felt the stares. People recognized me. Mark's family, our old friends. I could see the shock on their faces. Sarah and Mark were at the altar, about to exchange vows, when they noticed me. Sarah's face turned pale and Mark looked like he'd seen a ghost. I took a seat at the back, my eyes locked on them. The ceremony continued, but the tension in the room was thick. After the vows, during the reception, I decided it was time. I stood up, glass in hand, and tapped it gently to get everyone's attention. The room fell silent. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, my voice steady. Sarah's eyes widened, and Mark looked like he wanted to disappear. "To the happy couple," I began, "who found love in the most unexpected place, right under my nose." I paused, letting the words sink in. "Sarah, you were my best friend. You were the one I trusted more than anyone. And Mark, you were the man I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. But now I see that you two were meant for each other. After all, it takes a special kind of person to betray someone who loved you so deeply." The room was dead silent. Sarah looked like she was about to cry, and Mark couldn't meet my eyes. "So here's to you," I said, raising my glass. "May your marriage be as honest as your relationship was." I set the glass down and walked out, leaving the room in stunned silence. As I stepped outside, I felt a strange sense of relief. I had said what I needed to say. I didn't look back. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Sarah and Mark's marriage was already on the rocks. Apparently, the guilt and shame from the wedding had driven a wedge between them. Meanwhile, I was finally moving on. I started focusing on myself, my career, and my own happiness. I realized that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. A few days after the wedding, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from mutual friends, some supportive, others curious, and a few downright nosy. I ignored most of them, but one name caught my eye: Sarah. She had texted me. My stomach churned as I opened the message. "Can we talk? Please. I owe you an explanation." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to delete it and block her number, but another part was curious. What could she possibly say to justify what she'd done? After a long pause, I replied with a simple, "Meet me at the coffee shop tomorrow, 10 a.m." The next morning, I arrived early, my nerves on edge. Sarah walked in, looking nothing like the radiant bride from the wedding. Her eyes were red, her hair messy, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. She sat down across from me, her hands trembling as she clutched her coffee cup. "I'm so sorry," she began, her voice breaking. "I never meant for any of this to happen." I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. "Mark and it just happened, we didn't plan it. After your breakup, he came to me saying he was confused and needed someone to talk to. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "You were my best friend, Sarah. You knew how much he hurt me. How could you do this?" She looked down, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know. I was weak, and I messed up. But I want to make it right. Mark and it's not working. The wedding was a mistake." I leaned back in my chair, processing her words. "So, what now? You expect me to forgive you just like that?" She shook her head. "No, I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know the truth. And there's something else." She hesitated, then pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. "This is for you." I opened the envelope, my heart racing. Inside was a check, a large sum of money. "What is this?" I asked, confused. "It's from Mark," she said quietly. "He wanted to make amends. He said it's the least he could do after everything." I stared at the check, a mix of anger and disbelief bubbling inside me. "So he thinks he can buy my forgiveness?" Sarah shook her head. "No, it's not like that. He's leaving, Lindsay. He's moving out of state, and he wanted to leave this for you before he goes." I folded the check and put it back in the envelope, my mind racing. "Tell him I don't want his money. Tell him to keep it." Sarah looked defeated, but she nodded. "I understand. I hope one day you can forgive me." I stood up, my coffee untouched. "I don't know if I can, Sarah, but I'll try to move on. For my sake, not yours." As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, but also a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the closure I needed. A week later, I got another surprise. A letter arrived in the mail, this time from Mark. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a handwritten note. "Lindsay, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know how sorry I am. What I did was wrong, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. The money was my way of trying to make things right, but I understand if you don't want it. I'm leaving town and I won't bother you again. I just hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Take care, Mark." I folded the letter and put it away, unsure of how to feel. Part of me wanted to hate him, to hold on to the anger, but another part of me felt pity. He and Sarah had made a mess of their lives, and now they were paying the price. As for me, I was finally starting to heal. I threw myself into my work, reconnected with old friends, and even started dating again. Life was moving forward, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. But just when I thought the drama was over, something unexpected happened. One evening, as I was leaving work, I ran into an old acquaintance, someone who knew Mark and Sarah. "Hey, Lindsay," they said, looking nervous. "I heard about what happened at the wedding. I just thought you should know. There's more to the story." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" They hesitated, then said, "Mark and Sarah, they weren't just seeing each other after your breakup. They've been together for years, even while you and Mark were engaged." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. All this time, I thought the betrayal started after the breakup, but it had been going on for much longer. I felt a wave of anger and disbelief, but also a strange sense of relief. Finally, I had the full truth. And with that truth, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I couldn't sleep that night. The revelation that Mark and Sarah had been together for years, even while Mark and I were engaged, kept replaying in my mind. All those times Sarah had comforted me, all those times she'd assured me that Mark wasn't worth my tears, had been lies. She had been lying to my face, pretending to be my best friend while secretly betraying me with the man I loved. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. But this time, the anger wasn't paralyzing, it was empowering. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. The next morning, I called Sarah. She answered after a few rings, her voice hesitant. "Lindsay, I didn't think you'd want to talk to me again." I cut straight to the point. "I know the truth, Sarah. I know you and Mark were together long before the breakup. How could you do that to me? How could you pretend to be my friend while stabbing me in the back?" There was a long silence on the other end. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry, Lindsay. I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened." "It just happened," I repeated, my voice rising. "No, Sarah. You made a choice. You chose to betray me, and you chose to lie to me for years. And Mark, he chose to cheat on me with my best friend. Don't try to make excuses. I deserve the truth, and I'm done letting you two control the narrative." She started to cry, but I didn't let it sway me. "I'm done with both of you. Don't contact me again." After hanging up, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I had been carrying the weight of their betrayal for so long, but now I was ready to let it go. But before I could fully move on, there was one more thing I needed to do. I opened my laptop and started typing. I wrote a letter, not to Mark or Sarah, but to myself. I poured out all my feelings, all the pain and anger and confusion, and then I burned the letter in my fireplace. It was symbolic, but it felt like a weight had been lifted. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Mark. "Lindsay, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say something," he began. I stayed silent, letting him talk. "I'm sorry. For everything. I was selfish and weak, and I hurt you in the worst way possible. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I regret it every day. I'm leaving town and I won't bother you again. I hope you can find happiness, Lindsay. You deserve it." I didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, I replied, "Thank you for saying that, Mark. But this isn't about you anymore, it's about me, and I'm going to be just fine." I hung up, feeling a sense of finality. It was over. They were out of my life, and I was ready to move forward. But life had one more twist in store for me. A few weeks later, I ran into someone from my past, someone I hadn't seen in years. It was Alex, an old friend from college. We had lost touch after graduation, but seeing him brought back a flood of memories. We started talking, and before I knew it, we were catching up over coffee. He had heard about what happened with Mark and Sarah, and he was genuinely sympathetic. "I can't believe they did that to you," he said, shaking his head. "You deserve so much better." As we talked, I realized how much I had missed having a real friend, someone who cared about me without any hidden agendas. Alex and I started spending more time together, and before long I realized I was starting to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: happiness. It wasn't just about Alex. It was about rediscovering myself and realizing that I didn't need Mark or Sarah to define my worth. One evening, as Alex and I were walking through the park, he turned to me and said, "You know, Lindsay, you're one of the strongest people I know. What you went through, it would have broken a lot of people. But you came out of it even stronger." I smiled, feeling a sense of pride. "Thank you, Alex, that means a lot." As the sun set, I realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in my life. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I had faced my demons, stood up for myself, and come out on the other side. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Life with Alex was refreshing. He was kind, funny, and genuinely cared about me. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. We spent weekends exploring the city, trying new restaurants and laughing over old memories. It was easy being with him, and I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could trust someone again. But as much as I wanted to fully let my guard down, a small part of me was still hesitant. The scars from Mark and Sarah's betrayal ran deep, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to open my heart completely. One evening, as Alex and I were having dinner at my place, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. My stomach dropped as I read it. "Lindsay, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need to talk to you. It's important." I showed the message to Alex, who frowned. "What do you think she wants?" he asked. I shook my head. "I don't know, but I'm not sure I want to find out." Alex reached for my hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm here for you." I thought about it for a long time before finally replying, "What do you want, Sarah?" Her response came quickly. "I'm pregnant. It's Mark's baby. And he left me." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Pregnant? Mark left her? I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but another part of me was still too angry to care. Alex noticed the look on my face and asked, "What's going on?" I handed him my phone and he read the messages. "Wow," he said, handing it back. "That's a lot." I didn't respond to Sarah that night. I needed time to process everything. The next day, I decided to meet her. I needed to see her face to hear her say the words herself. We met at the same coffee shop where we'd talked before. She looked even more exhausted than the last time I'd seen her, her eyes red and puffy. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly. I nodded, not saying anything. She took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant, Lindsay. Mark's baby. He left a few weeks ago. He said he couldn't handle the guilt anymore, that he needed to start over somewhere else. I don't know what to do." I sat there trying to process everything. Sarah was pregnant and Mark had abandoned her. It was a mess they had created. But as much as I wanted to walk away, I couldn't ignore the fact that there was a baby involved. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" I asked, my voice steady. She looked down, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know. I don't have anyone else. My family's not supportive, and Mark's gone. I feel so alone." I sighed, feeling a mix of emotions, anger, pity, and frustration. "Sarah, you made your choices. You and Mark hurt me in ways I can't even describe. But this isn't about me anymore. It's about you and your baby. You need to figure out what you're going to do because I can't be the one to fix this for you." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I understand. I wanted you to know. And I wanted to say I'm sorry. One last time. For everything." I left the coffee shop feeling drained but also strangely relieved. I had said what I needed to say, and now it was up to Sarah to figure out her life. As I walked home, I thought about how far I'd come. I had faced my past, stood up for myself, and was finally starting to build a new life. But I also realized that healing wasn't a straight line. There would always be challenges, always moments that tested me. And that was okay. When I got home, Alex was waiting for me. "How did it go?" he asked. I sat down next to him, leaning into his shoulder. "It was hard," I admitted. "But I think I handled it the best I could." He wrapped his arm around me. "You're amazing, you know that. Not many people could have gone through what you did and come out stronger." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace. "Thanks, Alex. I couldn't have done it without you." As the weeks went by, I focused on building my new life. I threw myself into my work, reconnected with old friends, and spent more time with Alex. Sarah's pregnancy was a reminder of the past, but it no longer had power over me. I had faced my demons, and I had come out on the other side. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Alex and I grew closer, and I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't thought possible. He was patient, understanding, and never pushed me to move faster than I was ready. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in a healthy, supportive relationship. But even as I embraced this new chapter, the past had a way of creeping back in. One afternoon, I was scrolling through social media when I saw a post from Sarah. It was a photo of her holding a newborn baby, her face tired but glowing. The caption read, "Meet Emma, my little miracle." My heart sank as I stared at the photo. Sarah had named her daughter Emma, the name Mark and I had chosen for our future child. It felt like a punch to the gut, a reminder of the life I had lost. I quickly closed the app, trying to push the image out of my mind, but it lingered. Later that evening, I told Alex about the post. He listened quietly, then said, "You don't have to pretend it doesn't affect you, Lindsay. It's okay to feel hurt." His words were comforting, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Seeing Sarah with her baby brought up a mix of emotions: sadness, anger, and even a strange sense of longing. I had always wanted to be a mother, and seeing Sarah living that dream while I was still picking up the pieces of my life felt unfair. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Sarah. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note and a photo of baby Emma. The note read, "Lindsay, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I wanted you to meet Emma. She's a part of your past, just as much as she's a part of my future. I understand if you don't want to be involved in her life, but I wanted you to know that she exists. I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Love, Sarah." I stared at the photo, tears welling up in my eyes. Emma was beautiful, with a head full of dark hair and big, curious eyes. She looked so innocent, so unaware of the complicated world she had been born into. I felt a surge of emotions: love, sadness, and even a strange sense of responsibility. This baby was a part of my history, a living reminder of the life I had once dreamed of. But she was also a symbol of the betrayal that had shattered that dream. I didn't respond to Sarah's letter right away. I needed time to think. Alex encouraged me to take things one step at a time. "You don't have to make any decisions right now," he said. "Just focus on what feels right for you." His support gave me the strength to confront my feelings. I realized that while I couldn't change the past, I could choose how I moved forward. A few weeks later, I decided to write back to Sarah. I kept my message short and to the point. "Sarah, thank you for sharing Emma with me. She's beautiful, and I wish her nothing but happiness. As for us, I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you, but I'm trying to move on. Please respect my boundaries and don't contact me again. Take care of yourself and your daughter, Lindsay." Sending the letter felt like closing a chapter. I had acknowledged Emma's existence, but I had also made it clear that I needed to protect my own peace. It was a difficult decision, but it was the right one for me. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a sense of closure. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. In the months that followed, I focused on building a future that made me happy. Alex and I took a trip together, exploring new places and creating memories. I reconnected with old friends and even started volunteering at a local women's shelter, helping others who had faced betrayal and heartbreak. It felt good to give back, to use my experiences to make a difference in someone else's life. One evening, as Alex and I were watching the sunset, he turned to me and said, "You've come so far, Lindsay. I'm proud of you." I smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied. He shook his head. "You did this on your own. I just cheered you on." As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized that I had finally found peace. The road had been long and painful, but it had led me to a place of strength and self-discovery. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. Time has a way of healing wounds, even the deepest ones. As the months turned into years, the pain of Mark and Sarah's betrayal began to fade. It didn't disappear completely. There were still moments when a memory would catch me off guard, or a song would remind me of the past. But those moments became fewer and farther between. I had built a life that was full of love, laughter, and purpose, and I was finally at peace with where I was. Alex and I continued to grow together. Our relationship was built on trust, respect, and a shared understanding of what it meant to support each other. One evening, as we were cooking dinner together, he turned to me and said, Lindsay, I've been thinking, what if we took the next step? My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I asked, though I already had an idea. He smiled, pulling a small box from his pocket. I mean this. He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. Will you marry me? Tears filled my eyes as I looked at the ring, then at Alex. Yes, I said, my voice trembling. Yes, of course. He slipped the ring on my finger, and we hugged, laughing and crying at the same time. It was a moment of pure joy, a reminder that love could be beautiful and uncomplicated when it was built on a strong foundation. As we began planning our wedding, I thought about how far I had come. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had shaped me into the person I was today, someone who was stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. I knew that my past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I was ready to embrace this new chapter with an open heart. The wedding was small and intimate, surrounded by the people who had supported me through the hardest times. As I walked down the aisle, I felt a sense of gratitude for everything that had brought me to this moment. When I reached Alex, he took my hands and smiled. You're my best friend, he said, his voice filled with emotion. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you. As we exchanged vows, I thought about the lessons I had learned, about forgiveness, resilience, and the importance of choosing yourself. I had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and loss, but I had also found love, healing, and happiness. And as I looked into Alex's eyes, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. After the ceremony, as we celebrated with our loved ones, I felt a sense of closure. The past was behind me, and the future was full of possibilities. I had built a life that was mine, one that was filled with love, joy, and purpose. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. As the night came to an end, Alex and I stood together, watching the stars. Thank you, I said, leaning into him, for everything. He kissed the top of my head. Thank you for letting me be a part of your journey. And as we stood there, hand in hand, I realized that sometimes the hardest roads lead to the most beautiful destinations. I had faced my demons, stood up for myself, and come out stronger on the other side. And now, as I looked ahead to the future, I knew that the best was yet to come.